The Red Sox late last night acquired Willson Contreras from the St. Louis Cardinals in exchange for three pitchers. Contreras, who moved to first base full-time last year, had another nice season for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's been a pretty consistent offensive piece. We'll talk about the Cardinals' return in just a little bit. Duke, I want to start with you on this. We heard rumors about Contreras and the Red Sox going back to the winter meetings. I think in some people's mind, this deal took longer to consummate than expected. I know maybe you're not the high man on Contreras in the group, but the guy has been a pretty consistent offensive piece and should benefit from playing at Fenway Park, which tends to be very good for right-handed hitters.
Yeah, I mean, in his 10 years, as a career over OPS over 800. Last year, very similar numbers as a first baseman. I thought they might tick up a little bit, but he's getting up there. He's getting up there in age. It was 33, age 33 season. He played first base pretty much full time last year. If you look at him just among his other brethren at first base, 12th in WAR, 20th in slug, 20th in on base as a first baseman in the league. With 25% strikeout rate. But, he does add depth to the lineup. And so, I didn't think the acquisition cost was all that great. They got $8 million from St. Louis to buy down, the $42.5 that he's owed over 2 seasons. And so, I don't mind the deal from Boston's side of things. I keep looking for them to get that big piece that they traded at Rafael Devers last May. We still haven't seen it, but they keep getting better, even if it does meaning going to the Cardinals every time for a trade.
Look, Duke, I agree with you. I think, one thing we know about Contreras is what he's going to provide, right? And it's 20 homers, 75 RBIs or whatever. He'll get on base 35% of the time. Pretty consistent. I thought he worked hard to become okay at first base defensively. There was a lot to learn in changing positions from catcher to first base, but he worked hard at it. Comes to the ballpark every day. And so, I think, to Mike's point, I think Fenway Park works extremely well for him, the Green Monster. I think he'll do some damage for sure. I think that for the Cardinals' perspective, though, look, you got $34.5 million off the books. You have to pay $8 million of what's remaining of the contract, but you got for a 33-year-old first baseman, you got $34.5 million you can reallocate, and you got a mid to maybe third or fourth type starter in Hunter Dobbins once he rehabs from the ACL. Doesn't have the strikeout rate we like to see, but he's a solid guy that can be in your rotation. And then I like the kid Fajardo's upside. He's 19 years old. He's a teenager, but he's got a great arm, right? And so, he could end up being the best of the group. And then I kind of look as a throw-in in the deal. But, look at GM Chaim Bloom in St. Louis is doing what he said he was going to do. He was just going to look for controllable pitching. That he said that's what he's going to do this winter. He's going to do everything he can to trade Arenado, Gray, Contreras, and he wanted to get back young, controllable starters. So he's doing everything that he said he's going to do. I think the one disappointing part, and I don't think it's necessarily his fault, he's just not getting the potential high ceiling guys in any of the trades he made with Boston. He knows these guys very well, but it kind of like both of those deals to me smells more like the Betts trade. Like you didn't get anyone that moved the needle. You're taking a chance. Maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe Fajardo will end up being a guy and it'll work out. But I think moving the money, Mike and Duke, I think moving the money to reallocate makes sense from where they are in their rebuilding.
Yeah. I don't know that they were going to get a whole lot by getting somebody to take on Willson Contreras' money. I mean, I think in the end, that's what stood out about deals. I would say that Brandon Clark is a pretty interesting pitching prospect that they got in the Sonny Gray trade. I think he's a guy that has a chance maybe to have a little bit more upside than some of these others. I think as excited as people are about Fajardo, who was a great acquisition story for the Red Sox. They got him from the White Sox for Cam Boozer last spring, and as excited as people are about his arm in the secondaries, he kind of profiles as a back-end starter potentially or maybe a reliever. So it's not like for Contreras with what he's paid, it's not like he's overpaid. It's just that there's not a whole lot of surplus value that comes back. And so this deal did not surprise me. I'm sure they would love to acquire more upside in it, but I think that's the nature of these trades. And now, like anything that the Cardinals do, I think Sonny Gray was their biggest trade piece, right? Anything else is going to be probably more depth if they move JoJo Romero. I don't know that they'll get really anything for Nolan Arenado, but I didn't think the return on this was out of line. I thought that was, if you're going to focus on pitching, then that's the kind of pitchers you were going to get back in a trade for Willson Contreras, and it really didn't seem like there was much of a market for Contreras outside of Boston. I didn't hear his name anywhere. I thought he'd be a great fit in Milwaukee because his brother's there, and they could use, I guess I just don't buy Andrew Vaughn's success in the second half of last year. I hope he proves me wrong, because I keep looking for them to upgrade at that spot, and I don't think they're going to, but there just wasn't much there. Like, you're kind of trapped into who was going to be interested in Willson Contreras, and I think the fact that they found a taker for him and are able to at least add some organizational depth while freeing up the cash, that to me is about as good as they could have expected to do. I think in that sense it's not that different from the Betts trade, because the Betts deal had David Price attached to it, and that was more about dumping money than it was about acquiring talent. So I don't know. I think that they did about as well as could be expected. I just, again, like to your point, JB, like, it's not arms that you're like super excited about. Like, Dobbins could be a solid back end starter, right? If he's healthy, that's about it. That's what you're looking for with any of this. So.
Yeah, and for the Red Sox, look, this is an upgrade from Tristan Casas, right? It just is. And now they don't have to guess what they're going to get at first base. Now they know what they're going to get at first base. That helps. That lengthens the lineup with consistency that's needed in the infield, because their infield offense and defense has not been consistent. Now that you know what you're getting at first base, so now the next step, Duke, is either Bregman or Bichette. They've got to get either Bregman or Bichette to play third base. Like, this is a nice sign. But to your point, it's not Pete Alonso or Kyle Schwarber to be a difference maker in the middle of the lineup. So if you're going to do this, then you need two of these, right? And so I think if you can do Bregman or Bichette here to play third, to go with Contreras at first, then I think Boston will have had a really good offseason and put themselves in position, to be a legitimate contending playoff team.
Yeah, I don't think they're very far away they were a postseason team last year. You can see it's a team on the rise here, but they do have the money, the payroll flexibility to spend. It doesn't have to be this $300, $400 million player, but they do need to get better, like a Bregman or a Bichette, somewhere in that range. And if they do that, then I really like them, not just in the division, but in the American League. And if not, they still could maybe make the postseason, but it's a little more questionable for me. I did like the Gray acquisition. I didn't think the cost was all that great for him. But they picked up two older guys. I mean, the Gray is like, he's going to pitch at 36, right, or 37. Willson Contreras is going to play at 34. Those are guys that you at least in Contreras' side of things, you could try to pick up a guy like that on the free agent market and not have to give up any prospects. But this cost wasn't all that great. So, like, I get it. I understand it, all those things. So, but I'm still looking for the impact for them. They can do both. They can add to the roster and they can get impact free agent-wise. And, we'll see what Craig Breslow ends up coming up with. If it's, those two guys, Okamoto, I heard, see his name sometimes linked to Boston as well, but that doesn't fit as much now. So, unless you were going to play him at third, but I think Bregman or Bichette are the absolute perfect fits there.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're looking to, you're not looking to improve your defense. I don't think Okamoto fits, right? Like, that's Bregman was their best defender at third base last year, and so, we think Bichette will be better off of Short at either most likely second or at third. But yeah, they're both the fits that they're looking for. I think JB brought up Tristan Casas. I was reading a little bit from Ken Rosenthal this morning. It sounds like one of the concerns that they have with Casas is just how long it takes to come back from the patellar tendon surgery. He's got all his check marks, but it gives them a little more certainty at first base. There is the possibility that he could split time at first and DH some. There certainly have been some really good moments in Tristan Casas' career when he's been on the field. It's just the last two seasons have been marred by injuries and significant ones. They also have options left on him, so it's not like he's a guy that they have to trade. So they have created another layer of depth in that as well. The question is what they end up doing with Casas and as well, and how they either maintain that depth or use him as part of a piece to acquire something bigger. But everybody seems to think it's either Bregman or Bichette at this point that are their main focuses, and that they've gone down the, as much of the trade route as they're going to, unless they're going to add. I mean, they have so much. They have whittled away some of their starting pitching depth to just in these deals that they've made, and this one, especially with Dobbins having made the big leagues last year. They lose another potential arm. Like, is that someplace they still go? And we heard rumors that they were looking at starters on the free agent market too. Or is that if we can add somebody that impacts the top of the rotation somewhere behind, Crochet and ahead of Sonny Gray, we'll do it. But otherwise, we feel pretty comfortable about where we're at. Because that's, I think we're all focused on offense and looking at that. But there was one of their stated goals was we need to get a number 2 starter coming in. And they didn't really do that with Gray, even though Gray's peripherals kind of signal that he was better than that.
Yeah. But they think they did. So they view Gray as solving that. So they're not looking for another starting pitcher to put between Crochet and Gray. They believe Gray is that guy. And they like the curveball that he's got. They like the look of how it's going to be behind Crochet, the different look. So it sounds like to me, just in my discussions with the Red Sox, is that their next goal is Bregman or Bichette. And I think if that happens, the winners basically are wrapped. Doesn't mean if another arm became available, obviously every team looks at that. But I think they'll be really comfortable where they are, Duke, if they can get Bregman back, which is really their first choice.
Yeah, well, and I think if you look at like the back end starters, the top 3 are especially if Bayo pitches the way he's capable of. Right, we've seen some really good spurts, let's say, longer periods of time with Bayo when he's pitching well. They do have the younger pitchers there that they can kind of throw into the mix after trading for Oviedo. I don't know what you're going to get out of Kyle Harrison. I know he was making adjustments in the minor leagues. He's a guy that had good stuff, just had a hard time commanding it when he was with the Giants. So we know, there is the potential there. We saw Tolley and Early, both of those guys. So I think in terms of back end type, depth, they have it. I wouldn't mind them seeing another kind of starting pitcher in there. But like you said, if that's not the way they're looking to go, I feel like they can get by there. But I think a lot of this is it's not unlike when we sit there and talk about some of the other teams. Like, I like Gray. I would rather have Gray in the three spot of a rotation for the traditional spot. But if they're looking at him as the 2 guy, great. All right, we'll see if they're right on that side of it. But I do think there's more in Bayo than what he showed. Obviously, he had some health issues there last year too, because he only had short of 28 starts or so.
Yeah, the reason I asked is we'd heard them linked to like Michael King, right? And we certainly have still heard Jarren Duran trade rumors, right? We're getting to the point where we're starting to hear some of these names and trade rumors where it feels like the likelihood of a deal is fading. I don't know if Duran fits that mold or not, because there have been enough rumors and there's been enough smoke around him for a year that that it doesn't. I don't know how to parse that right now, but it certainly it feels like one more right-handed bat is the biggest key for them right now, and we'll go from there. So, I mean, because it's
one thing
some
on
of
the
the
King.
We'll talk about the Royals later. Go ahead.
Yeah. One thing on the King rumor. So I had heard that, but it was in conjunction with a trade. So it was they were going to trade a starter for something, and then go hard after King as a replacement for that starter that they traded. So that was
the Ketel Marte.
The difference. I don't know if
that was the
heard that.
Ketel Marte trade rumors.
Right.
Yeah, because they were going to trade one of their starting pitchers in the deal for Marte, and then turn around and trade King to replace that pitcher in the rotation. But the Marte trade talks after the Contreras trade are now over. Red Sox are not engaged anymore on that. That's over. Yeah, from what I was told.
That feels like it's coming. I would say that the odds of Marte being traded have diminished over the last week or so. It feels like you're getting to the deadline for it. I'm not sure that they're going to carry this much beyond Christmas. So, and it doesn't necessarily take them out of the Bregman talks, but that's just it feels like they have not gotten the offers that they want because they're not motivated to move him. It's not a motivated seller. It's if we can fill a bunch of needs, we'll do it. So,
wake up, everybody! The Cardinals and Red Sox make another deal. There's something about being able to familiarity and to be able to sort of make deals get done. And we saw the Cardinals and Red Sox make a deal earlier for Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray going from the Cardinals to the Red Sox, and now another deal. Willson Contreras, first baseman for the Cardinals, now a member of the Boston Red Sox, and with him going $8 million is part of that, and to offset some of the $42.5 million remaining on the deal. And in addition, coming back in return, Hunter Dobbins, who's a Major League ready starting pitcher for the Cardinals. That's exactly what they were looking for. Then right-handed pitching prospect Yolker Fajardo and Blake Alta going back to the Cardinals as well. So 3 pitchers going to St. Louis. And Willson Contreras, one of the most consistent offensive players. You don't get a whole lot of peaks and valleys. You get just pretty much the same numbers year after year after year, which is, pretty much a 257, 357, 457 batting average on base and slugging percentage is where he's been for the most part. And certainly I think going to be a really solid fit at first base along, with Tristan Casas for the Boston Red Sox.
We're seeing Craig Breslow of the Red Sox and Chaim Bloom now of the Cardinals wheeling and dealing. And I think this Contreras trade does exactly what you mentioned, gives predictability to first base for the Red Sox, which they didn't really have a whole lot of last year. And you think about both of those corner positions, as Breslow mentioned when we heard the sound, is like going into the offseason, those are the priorities outside of pitching. We got to figure out where we're going to get offense from 2 power spots. And you go and get one that has been predictable from an offensive standpoint. And even, with some swing and miss that Contreras has, he has productive at-bats. The veteran leadership, all that stuff comes along with it, but it strengthens a position where you didn't know what you were going to have. And it gives you now opportunity to trade Tristan Casas if that's something that you see fit for maybe an arm or whatnot. But I like this, of course, for the Red Sox shoring up a position, and then for the Cardinals getting some arms that they really needed, Steve. That's been the focus for the Cardinals organization for a long period of time. Now you start to bring some of those back in with Chaim Bloom. That's huge.
Yeah, and I think that, Chaim Bloom knowing the Red Sox organization is helpful. I do. I think that his opinion of some of the players that he's seen as a general manager, oftentimes you're making trades for players you've not seen before. And so you're basing it upon scouts and scouting reports, but it's one thing to do that. And look, that has value, and it's worked plenty of times for me to be able to trust the scout and the word. But it also just, it is such a reinforcement when you've seen a player to know that, okay, my eyes have been on him too. It matches what the scouts have seen and what they've said, and we're bringing back, 3 talented guys for our organization. But I think we start to look at the lineup now for the Red Sox, and you get that right-handed bat. Now, and look, it does not preclude them from bringing Alex Bregman back too. Think about that. So you get Bregman back at third start thinking about the quality of the professional at-bats you've got a chance to put together would be really amazing, right? When you start to think about, all 3 outfielders that you have, then Trevor Story, and if you were able to get Bregman and Contreras and what you're putting together for an offensive team, that's pretty good. And there's no reason why there's still not potentially room for Casas. If they keep the 4 outfielders, then there's less of an opportunity for at-bats for him, because this is not going to be a platoon where Contreras hits against left-handers and Casas hits against right-handers. Contreras is going to be the first baseman. And right. Look, for the Red Sox, Casas is a trade chip. Like, if I'm out there, I'm all over Casas as a trade chip.
Yeah, the one way Casas, I think this is the X factor here, right, Casas, because we know what he's capable of doing and we can expect him to grow as a hitter, but the only way they really keep him is if they figured out a way to dump Masataka Yoshida's salary, his contract, and then possibly Casas and Contreras could be able to share and flip between first base and DH, depending upon if they bring in anybody else. But I think that would be the only way. Other than that, there's got to be a lot of teams in on what Tristan can bring as a first baseman, as a DH capable player. on a team that could be rebuilding too, not just a team that's ready to win now, but he could be a trip for a team that's looking to rebuild. But to your point about the lineup, Steve, starting to look stacked and very versatile in a sense too. I think that's the one thing you don't want to handcuff Cora, because he's so good at being able to move guys around, not just defensively, but also up and down through that lineup. And it gives him a lot now with another right-handed power bat, in which they were pretty left-handed heavy.
Yeah, so where can they take Yoshida? Because, I mean, the one thing is, like, I like his at-bats. Like, he had some quality at-bats and was maybe their best hitter in the postseason last year with his approach at the plate. Now, they didn't have Roman Anthony there, but you're right. I mean, with Yoshida and then Abreu, Cedeno Rafaela, Duran, and Roman Anthony, and Cassis, and Yoshida, it's too crowded. Right, there's not enough room for everybody to get at bats, and it could end up having depreciating returns, and so like diminishing returns. So I could look at, and I'm with you. I think probably they keep Yoshida because he's less movable than $18.6 million contract for each of the next 2 years, and Cassis is probably the chip. Like the Minnesota Twins need a first baseman. That would be a great fit. Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez. Now, they said they're going to hold on to those guys, but you wonder whether you could lure them away in some case. Is there a way I could put a package together to try to get a pitcher from somewhere with Cassis being part of it? And even if it's a premium guy, if I have to put together, if I go to the Marlins, what do you think I can get for a Cassis? Because they could upgrade first base. Cassis and I wouldn't trade Duran, but it seems like he's the name out there. If Cassis and Duran were going to go to the Marlins, you might get all of their pitchers.
I would definitely want. The Sandy is tough, right? Because you can get him at low value right now, but obviously he's the oldest of the three. Like I at least need Edward Cabrera and Yuri Perez. Like, give me those two off your hands, and you can have Tristan Cassis, of course. But who knows if they'd be willing to do, 2 out of 3 of those guys. But yes, I'd at least need 2 out of 3.
Yeah, I think that to try to lure away some pitching, I would at least have a thought about getting in on that. And I wonder what Kansas City might do if you include Cassis in the deal. Now, the problem they have is at some point Salvi's going to be more of a DH than he is anything else, with Carter Jensen there too. So, you need to keep the DH role there, and they have Pasquatch at first. But if you had Cassis there at least for a year or two, you might be able to use that DH role to really get more thump in the lineup, because they've got to find it wherever they can find it right now.
Yes.
The Guardians. What would the Guardians be? Well, the Guardians have some really good young pitching. Really good young starters. Like the guys that came up last year. Merrick did a nice job when he came up last year. If you could go there, they could use a first baseman in Cassis. They could use an outfielder with some offensive production. Mm-hmm. And they've got pitching I think that they might be able to spare a little bit as well. So I think some intriguing
another team, another intriguing name that we've heard thrown around too is Mackenzie Gore. And that could be another one where maybe it's not only Cassis, but maybe obviously some more alongside of that. And if they're looking for more offense, a Duran could be a part of that, a Tristan Cassis. So and I was thinking about the Nationals too, because they've always had, or at least when they were good, they had a certified first baseman. Zimmerman, like every day, somebody that is going to be power, but also the ability to get on base. That is the days they need to get back to. Yeah.
And Cassis hasn't really been a guy that can prove he can be there every day because of all the fluke injuries that he's had. But I think there's some places where they can go with him that there could be some opportunity there to really impact their team for the long term. So that's what I talk about. like everybody's down on the Red Sox. I'm like, I am so bullish on the Red Sox right now. And people were mad they hadn't done a lot and everything else. They added Sonny Gray into their rotation. They added Oviedo into their rotation. Everybody's mad about it. They brought back Chapman to be the closer, and now they've got a first baseman in Willson Contreras. Yeah, he's not Pete Alonso, but the financial commitment is not even close to what Alonso's was. They traded from a position of strength, and now they've built even more depth offensively that they can now trade from. So I love where the Red Sox are, and I think they've done a good job so far this offseason. I mean, I remember last year, I thought that the Red Sox had the offseason the Orioles should have had. So that's back-to-back, I think, for Craig Breslow. Good offseason so far, with still room to improve with a lot of players out there moving forward. So I think that the Red Sox are certainly going to be a better team, and I think people underrate Willson Contreras as an offensive player. There's all the stigma about the frustration about him not being a catcher anymore. But when he was being looked at and they thought we're going to move him to first base, he would have been the 6th ranked first baseman offensively going into last season when they made that transition. Like after the 23 season, after the 24 season, going into 25, he would have been the 6th ranked first baseman with his offensive numbers. Like he's very productive and very consistent. And now with Fenway, it plays into his game as well.
Well, I think a couple things with you mentioning that point. One, remember last year was just his first full season of playing first base. So alongside of the obstacles and hurdles that you got to get through of really learning the position on an everyday basis, he still was a 124 OPS plus type of hitter. So like to me, I think there's room for improvement, not having to worry so much about really learning the position throughout the course of the year. So I think that helps Boston. Another thing, too, that I think about that really helps Boston is that right-handed bat, Steve. Like we talked a lot about kind of them being able to mix and match and how matchups can come into play at times. And with Cora and his ability to really be able to play off of matchups, I think having an even lineup with another guy that's a power righty plays huge for, Cora, obviously Contreras and Fenway, and gives you more of that run production even if you don't end up getting a Bregman, right? So I think there's so many benefits to now bringing in Willson Contreras and somebody that's got that mentality that you need as well, like somebody that's going to win, expects to win, and is ready to fight too. He's one of those players that's ready to fight to win, and I love that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And so I think that so much was made about attitude with him, but and the Cubs, remember all the hit by pitches with the Cubs and beaning him and everything else and back and forth there made him out to be a guy. But he's not a bad guy on a
fierce
team
competitor.
at all. Yeah, I'm with you on it. And so I like this for Boston. I do. I think that they're a better team now. I think for the Cardinals, it's the right thing to do. One, you freed up a bunch of money, and it freed up at bats and opportunity to try to continue to develop some young players. I like what it's doing. It doesn't mean you're going to win more games this year. You're not a better team this year. But the goal of a general manager is, yes, you want to win a championship, but you also want to win the most games over the most number of years. And this may be a step in that direction for them to be able to get to that point more quickly with financial flexibility and prospects coming back in return. All right, so the Red Sox make the deal. They get Willson Contreras. That's a big one there. But also news, remember, Munetaka Murakami only had until December 22nd to make a deal. He had been posted back in November. You're allowed 45 days, and that early posting made it somewhat difficult for him because, as it turned out, as things unfolded, he started turning into Plan B for Alex Bregman, for Bo Bichette, for Pete Alonso, and so teams were waiting for those other guys to sign to figure out the value for Murakami, and he got caught in a pickle, but he was able to make a deal. We'll tell you who he made the deal with and the impact next in the leadoff spot on MLB Network Radio.